This is Narrative Elements, Chapter 3C, completing the discussion of symbols. We were talking about how to shift our attention away from symbolism per se to imagery, which every symbol involves imagery, but not every image needs to be interpreted as a symbol. All right. I'm going to say a few words about symbolism and imagery in nonfiction, using the example of an essay called Patient in last year's Best American Essays by Rachel Reederer. So you could ask yourself if there even is ever such a thing as a symbol in nonfiction. Like we said, if a gal is named Faith in real life, then that's just her name, right? So in this essay, Patient, Rachel Reederer was run over by a bus, which crushed her left leg pretty bad, and then she spent quite a while in the hospital, not being sure whether or not she was still going to have two legs at the end of it all. The bus running over her is no kind of symbolic event. It's just what actually happened to her. But notice, she chose the title, Patient, which is a word that has two meanings. Reederer was a hospital patient for a very long time, and that's what I would call kind of the most fundamental or literal meaning here. But floating up on top of that, or if you prefer, submerged somewhere underneath that, is this other idea of being patient as a personality trait or as a virtue. And under the surface of this essay, Reederer is revealing to us her struggles against impatience and her effort to cultivate the virtue of patience after having something really bad happen to her. So even if the writer is doing nothing but tell the exact truth, they can build in some interpretive opportunities for us. Now here's a detail from that essay. Just after the accident, Reederer is rushed to the hospital, slapped on a gurney, dosed with morphine and dilaudid, and is being prepped for an emergency operation. The nurse wants to cut the shoe off my left foot. I cannot let her. I love these shoes. They are Mary Jane's, but they are soft and have soles like sneakers, and they are pink with red checkers. My swollen ham foot is bursting out of the left shoe, but I can still unhook the small silver buckle. I sit up, and while I am unstrapping the cute, salvageable, only slightly torn shoe from the ruined foot, another nurse comes in. Okay. At this moment, when the main question on everyone else's mind is, can this leg be saved, Reederer is worrying about her shoes. She describes them in very loving detail. They're obviously important possessions for her. The shoe is described as cute, whereas the foot is a swollen ham. The shoe is salvageable. The foot is ruined. That's an interesting juxtaposition, right? And maybe it's partly because of the drugs that she's on, in addition to partly perhaps the weird frame of mind somebody might be in after they've been hit by a bus and their bodily integrity is severely compromised because of it. But doesn't it seem like the concern that anybody would naturally have for their body parts, wanting to care for your own body and keep it safe, has been kind of displaced here onto the shoes? Later on in the essay, the author goes into great detail about how she happened to choose exactly those shoes that night. They were a little bit less sexy than her red boots, but they're more comfortable for dancing, etc. And it becomes clear then that shoes have special meaning for her, that they're part of her self-image, and they're part of the way she presents herself in social life. So the shoes in this piece, this short essay, are meeting our criteria for symbols. They appear at a crucial moment, they appear more than once, and they participate in a thematic network. If you wanted to say Reederer was using these shoes as a symbol, I wouldn't call you wrong. But myself, I would be more inclined to talk about the shoes in the operating room in terms of how they make a vivid image, and how this image has emotional resonance, which is explored here and elsewhere in the essay. I would say that at this moment, the main character has identified with her shoes to an unusual degree, almost as if they were a body part, and at the same time she feels somewhat alienated from her damaged foot. So it's like, temporarily at least, the shoes are a stand-in for her foot. She couldn't save her foot from the accident, but she can still save her shoes. And if she can do that, maybe she can somehow hold on to her life as a pretty girl, young and stylish, who likes dancing. Here's some final words of advice about symbols. Number 1, symbolic meaning doesn't trump literal meaning. Shoes are still shoes, even if they also, at the same time, stand for carefree youth, style, and health. Number 2, so the English teachers who so inadvertently made me suffer so much when I was young, I understand them better now. When they said there were no right or wrong answers, I don't think that's true. I don't think they got that one right. But I now think they had 2 excellent motives for saying that. There's not a unique right answer in the sense of algebra. We covered that. But also, English teachers have their own readings of literary works and their own favorite interpretations. I mean, how could we not? But sometimes we try to keep our own readings a secret because we don't want to influence people. We want them to try to do their own interpreting without being overwhelmed by our teacherly authority. But sometimes also we can't resist and we just start in. Okay, this is what I think the pink ribbon means. Okay, this is what I think the shoes mean. But it's a very rare English teacher that's an interpretive tyrant where they say only my reading is right and if yours is different from mine, it's wrong. And that's what they mean when they say there are no right or wrong answers. They're trying to encourage you to differ. We're pleased, most of us, when people offer rival interpretations and they can defend them with evidence. And if we suggest a particular interpretation, it's okay to disagree with us. In fact, it's kind of annoying and disappointing when the only thing students are ever willing to do in discussion is try to figure out what we think is the right answer so that they can repeat it back later. You're better off just continuing to look at the story yourself until something gels for you, and then you can say what you actually think about it, even if that's different from the teacher's version. Now, one caveat. I can't promise that you will never ever encounter any English teacher anywhere that takes a punitive attitude toward respectful, well-argued disagreement. But really, it is pretty rare. 3. Like we said, you don't have to deal with symbols. They are often a good source for a term paper, and unlike plot, if you have a good analysis, symbols alone can carry you through a good paper. But you don't have to go the symbolic route. There are other good things to analyze, and there are other things that it's easier to do well with. If you do deal with symbols, you don't have to nail down every single thing in exactly one way and exclude other readings. And you don't have to cover everything about the symbol. For instance, in Moby Dick, there's one whole chapter called The Whiteness of the Whale. So if the whale is a symbol, which obviously it is, then there's an entire essay that you could potentially devote to just one tiny little element of that symbol. If you're assigned, final advice, part 4, if you're assigned to write an interpretive paper, I recommend that you don't start by trying to come up with a thesis, that is, engage in top-down composition. Instead, build your paper bottom up. Begin by gathering interesting or provocative or mysterious images and trying to interpret them, just bit by bit, atom by atom. And then after you have a bunch of these small interpretations stacked up, then see if you can hook them up into something bigger. Finally, advice for creative writers. I caution you, do not overdo it. Don't think that you can float a narrative on symbols alone. That almost never succeeds. And also, I urge you, like the lit students, to be more oriented to starting at the bottom with the details and letting meaning emerge by gradually coming upward, rather than imposing meaning starting from the top and forcing it downward. We'll talk about this again. That concludes Chapter 3, Symbol. Every other chapter after this will be shorter and easier. The hard part is behind us.